Hey, what's up, Gunslinger Nation? Welcome back. Spider-Man 2 was supposed to be the ultimate superhero experience. Bigger, better, and bolder than before. But after going back and giving it another playthrough on the PC, I've got a lot to say. Some parts blew me away, others not so much. Today we're breaking it all down, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the decisions that left the fans scratching their heads. Did Insomniac deliver or did they fumble the web? Let's swing into it. Spider Man 2 had an intriguing premise, but ultimately it fell short of delivering a truly satisfying story. Early on, it became clear that Miles Morales was being positioned as the main focus, while Peter was sidelined, pushing him into a mentor role instead of the iconic hero. He felt more like a stepping stone, in my honest opinion. While it's great to see Miles shine, Peter's handling in the game felt forced, sidelining him rather than organically passing the torch. The core problem: Insomniac stripped Peter of his defining qualities to make room for Miles. In the comics, Peter Parker is a seasoned Spider Man with more than a decade of experience. A genius who has outwitted countless villains, constantly learning and adapting. He's a brilliant mind in the Marvel Universe, capable of creating his own web shooters, outsmarting stronger villains, and using both brains and bronze to defeat them. But in Spider Man 2, this intellect is reduced greatly. Peter blindly accepts the symbiote without analyzing its dangers, ignoring every warning sign. This isn't the Peter Parker that fans know. Someone who thinks ahead, considers the consequences, and learns from past mistakes. Instead of Instead, Peter makes reckless decisions and is outplayed in situations where he should dominate. And rather than conquering the symbiote's corruption on his own, Peter is saved by Miles, which completely undermines his entire character arc. Completely. One of Spider Man's most iconic stories is his battle with the symbiote, testing his willpower and self control. The symbiote arc in the game starts with Peter bonding with the suit at one point, enhancing his strength and aggression. Initially, this could have been a setup for a powerful storyline. Peter struggling with the influence, realizing the suit is changing him in ways he doesn't want. In the comics, Peter's internal struggle is intense. He recognizes how the symbiote is corrupting his moral compass, making him more aggressive and violent. He fights this change, ultimately choosing to reject the symbiote because he knows it's wrong, because he remembers what his Uncle Ben told him, that with great power comes great responsibility, which is a huge part of who his character is. So this decision is the crux of his character development. However, in Spider-Man 2, the game skips over the necessary internal struggle. While we do see Peter become more aggressive and reckless, he never acknowledges the suit's effects on him. He simply embraces its power, convincing himself that it makes him a better Spider Man. He even says, "It makes me a better Spider Man," never realizing the danger it poses. And when others warn him, Mary Jane, Miles, even Dr. Connors warns him. And even Danica, who has a podcast in the game, says that the new Spider Man that he is portraying scares her a little bit, that the black suit is creepy. He brushes them all off, saying they don't understand. Not because he's conflicted, but because the game doesn't allow him to struggle. Instead of battling himself and ultimately rejecting the symbiote on his own, Peter is passive, and the suit is taken from him by Miles. And Peter doesn't even acknowledge there was a problem and choose to reject the suit till after it's removed, which removes the entire arc of his struggle. This choice strips Peter of the pivotal moment in his arc, the moral dilemma between power and responsibility. In the comics, Peter's rejection of the symbiote is a moment of intense personal growth. He doesn't have anyone to save him. He faces the symbiote alone. Peter realizes it's corrupting him, and in a painful act of willpower, he tears it off himself in a church tower. The bells toll, amplifying the struggle that helps to free Peter from the symbiote. And during this time, Peter there's both physical and emotional pain to do what's right. It's a moment of sacrifice, resilience, and responsibility of pure Spider Man. But Spider Man 2 removes this struggle. and this internal battle. Peter never reaches the breaking point. Instead of reinforcing the core values that define his ability to choose what's right despite temptation, the game makes Peter a passive participant, never constantly rejecting the symbiote till after it's removed. And instead of moral struggle, the decision is made for him by Miles. This decision, diminishes the significance of Peter's redemption and makes his struggle feel unearned because there was no struggle. The game removes the very choice that makes the symbiote arc so compelling. Peter's active decision to rid himself of the symbiote because he understands what it's doing to him. This not only undermines Peter's growth, but also removes the emotional weight of the battle. In the comics, Peter's rejection of the symbiote is one of the greatest moments, reinforcing everything Spider-Man stands for: his humility, responsibility, an unwavering sense of what's right. In Spider-Man 2, Peter loses the suit, not by choice, but because of Miles, completely robbing him of this defining moment and diminishes the arc's power. And then there's Mary Jane. And no, I'm not talking about the visual redesigns that made her look more masculine and uglier, because that has been beaten to death by pretty much everyone. The Mary Jane I want to talk about is the same Mary Jane Watson who, in the classic Spider Man stories, was often portrayed as confident, charming, and supportive love interest. A successful supermodel and actress who brought light into Peter's life despite his struggles. But in this game, she's barely recognizable, both in looks and personality. Her gameplay segments were some of the worst parts of the entire experience. Every time I was forced into a Mary Jane mission, the pacing of the game slowed to a crawl. You go from fast paced, action packed Spider Man gameplay to a tedious stealth section where you have no powers. This abrupt shift kills the momentum, making her sections feel like unwanted roadblocks rather than meaningful gameplay. A normal, untrained human being dodging bullets somehow, fighting highly trained mercenaries, and somehow taking on symbiotes, all while Peter and Miles, superpowered heroes, struggle. And not only that, but she's actually overpowered in her own way. Instead of feeling like a vulnerable, resourceful character surviving against the odds, she's unrealistically taking out highly trained enemies with a stun gun. Really? This forced empowerment undermines the stakes and makes her missions feel unearned. It's immersion breaking. And the moment when she gets taken over by the symbiote and Peter has to fight to save her was just plain ridiculous. Throughout the entire battle, Mary Jane is whining about how Peter doesn't appreciate her and how everything is always about him, instead of acknowledging the weight of his responsibility, saving the city, protecting lives, and constantly putting himself at risk. She complains about his struggles with work and finances as if Spider-Man isn't an impossible balancing act. If she truly had such a huge problem with Peter's life as Spider-Man, then why did she not leave? Why did she choose to stay with him instead of just walking away? And why are her missions so freaking compared to previous games? In Spider-Man 2018, MJ's stealth sections were shorter, more limited, making them a little more tolerable. A little. In Spider-Man 2, they happen to be too often and last longer, making them an even bigger problem. Players don't buy a Spider-Man game to play as Mary Jane. They buy it to play as Spider-Man, not to get stuck in forced stealth missions that drag the game down. It makes her complaints feel hollow, as if she expects Peter to be everything at once: her perfect boyfriend, successful, a hero, and someone who prioritizes his career and her over the safety of the entire city. And then there's Craven the Hunter, a fantastic, brutal, menacing, not undeniable force. In the game, Craven believes that taking down a worthy opponent is the ultimate test of his worth, as he sees it as his last chance for a glorious death. While this adds a layer of tragedy to his character, showing that he's a man who's lost his way and seeking a final act of triumph, it ultimately undercuts his potential as a villain. Craven's brutality is also showcased in the game, as video footage reveals him fighting and seemingly killing Scorpion, and they hint at several of Spider-Man's iconic foes being taken out by Craven, because you find Vulture's wings, you find Shocker's gauntlets, as if they've fallen prey to Craven. These scenes portray him as a ruthless hunter, willing to take down anyone he deems weaker in his pursuit of the ultimate challenge. However, rather than exploring the moral implications of his actions, the game glosses over them. This shows Craven's obsession with proving his dominance, because the game does little to delve into his emotional and psychological toll these actions take on him. Instead of creating a psychological showdown where Craven forces Spider Man to confront his greatest fears, weaknesses, and doubts, the game cuts his arc short by having him fight and be killed by Venom. This feels rushed and underdeveloped, and actually disappointing, especially when you consider how legendary Craven's Last Hunt is in the comics. In Craven's Last Hunt, Craven's obsession with proving his superiority reaches new heights. Not only does he defeat Spider Man, but he goes so far as to bury him alive, symbolizing his belief that he is the ultimate hunter. Craven's actions are driven not just by malice, but by his own twisted sense of honor. He believes that by capturing Spider Man and showing himself superior, he can prove his legacy, even if it means losing his own humanity. This is a story filled with psychological depth. Craven's mind is unraveling as he tries to assert control over his destiny in the face of his own mortality. In Spider Man 2, however, the game doesn't explore this psychological complexity at all. They gloss over it. Instead, Craven's motivations are simplified, reducing him to a man who is seeking a worthy death, rather than the obsessed, mentally deteriorating hunter. While Craven's brutality is apparent through his actions, the emotional and psychological drive behind it all is all but left unexplored. The game misses a huge opportunity to explore Craven's complex character and his warped sense of honor. Ultimately, Craven's confrontation with Spider-Man should have been about more than just a physical strength. It should have been a battle of wills, a test of Spider-Man's very identity and purpose. In the comics, Craven's psychological warfare forces Peter to question who he is, pushes him to the brink of madness, and showing just how far he will go to protect those he loves. But in the game, those stakes aren't there. His story lacks any meaningful resolution. Instead of a battle of minds and wills, Craven's arc is cut short and resolved through a quick, unsatisfying death at the hands of Venom. And while Venom is visually stunning, his narrative is weak. Because in Spider Man 2, Venom takes on a dramatically different role compared to his comic book counterpart, and not for the better. In the game, Harry Osborn becomes Venom, not out of hatred for Peter, but as a tragic result of desperation. Harry is dying, and his father, Norman Osborn, in a last ditch effort to save him, uses the symbiote to try and cure him. The idea of Venom as a byproduct of Harry's desperate need to survive makes sense in a way, but fundamentally alters what makes Venom such a formidable and compelling character. In the comics, Venom is one of Spider Man's most dangerous foes because of the sheer hatred he holds toward Peter. The symbiote bonds with Eddie Brock, who has his own deep resentment for Peter, and together they form Venom, a relentless, vengeful force that exists to destroy Spider Man. Their rivalry is personal, intense, and deeply rooted in Peter's rejection of the symbiote. But in Spider Man 2, the game removes all that animosity, making Venom feel more like a victim of circumstance rather than a malevolent force of vengeance. Instead of wanting to annihilate Peter for his past actions, Harry's Venom seeks to recruit him, shifting the core dynamic of the relationship. This changes Venom from an embodiment of rage and revenge into a more tragic figure, diluting the power of his character. While Harry's Venom does attempt to recruit Peter by appealing to their past and reminiscing about their friendship, offering him a brotherhood instead of rivalry, this connection does not carry the same weight as the intense personal conflict seen in the comics. The game presents this connection between Harry and Peter in a way that feels less like a deep rivalry and more like a twisted offer of kinship, which undermines the emotional stakes of the conflict. In the comics, Peter's battle with Venom is not just a physical one, but a psychological one. The symbiote's hold on Peter and later Eddie represents one of the most greatest internal struggles and internal battles Spider Man faces, struggling with the urge for power and control and having to ultimately reject it for the greater good. But in Spider Man 2, Harry's Venom feels disconnected from that deep personal struggle. Peter's conflict with the symbiote is already downplayed, and now Venom's lack of personal vendetta further diminishes the stakes. The game's version of Venom doesn't carry the same emotional punch as the comic counterpart. The game's portrayal of Venom is visually impressive, absolutely. Harry's transformation into the symbiote is somewhat intense and chilling a little bit, and the battles involving Venom showcase some of the most visually exciting moments in the game. But visually stunning doesn't always translate to compelling narrative. Venom's character feels underdeveloped and stripped of its rich backstory that made him one of Spider Man's most iconic and personal adversaries. Instead of intense personal conflict and psychological warfare seen in the comics, we're left with a version of Venom who, despite his attempt to connect with Peter through their shared history, lacks deep, vengeful drive that made their rivalry so compelling in the original stories. And while there are a lot of negatives, there are some positives and a few nitpicks if I want to be honest. Because one of the nitpicks that I found is that in all the Spider-Man games up to this point, they keep changing the web gadgets. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for new gadgets, but why remove the old ones completely instead of letting players choose the ones they want to use? Every game so far has changed the web gadget lineup. Instead of expanding Peter's arsenal, they removed the gadgets from the previous games, forcing players to adapt to a limited selection. This contradicts Peter Parker's character in the comics, where he constantly builds upon his tech and improves his gear. Rather than discarding useful tools, in the comics, Peter constantly upgrading his tech, expanding his arsenal, and not replacing what already works. Now, for the positive thing, web slinging is still top tier, if not a little bit better than it was in previous games. And the addition of the web wings makes reversal even better. The web wings in particular takes mobility to the next level, allowing players to glide across the city with unmatched speed and freedom. Well, I'm not sure how frequently the web wings are used in the comics. In this game, they made a noticeable impact on movement, making traversal feel more versatile than ever before. Traversal is easily one of the best parts of the game, making movement across New York feel dynamic and exhilarating. I loved it. But with all of that said, does Spider Man 2 deliver? Yes, but it plays it safe. While the game delivers solid gameplay, amazing traversal, and a world that feels even more alive, it doesn't break new ground like fans were hoping. The game sticks to what worked in previous titles, but it fails to push the narrative forward and the characters to new heights. Peter Parker's role is already reduced, and diminished intellect feels like a missed opportunity. The symbiote arc lacks emotional depth, and they could have made it one of Spider-Man's most defining moments. The Venom's rivalry with Peter loses its intensity, making the conflict a lot less impactful. And then there's some of the side content where you complete missions at Miles' school. And then there's Haley, who's a deaf girl who goes around the city fixing graffiti. Completely annoying, in my opinion. I did not like those missions at all. It completely detracted from the whole point of the game, in my opinion. Ultimately, Spider Man 2 is a fun, engaging game, but it doesn't quite live up to its potential. It delivers more of a what we love about the franchise, but it plays it safe instead of taking bold risks to elevate the story and the characters and be like, holy crap, this is the best game ever. But that's all I got for y'all. Those are my thoughts, my honest review. I appreciate y'all tuning in. And if you like what I did, if you like my content, hit that like button, drop a comment on your thoughts, and tell me what you think of Spider Man 2. And subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. and I'll catch y'all in the next one.